So I am working on a doll custom involving a Creatable World body, and while I have a lot of clothes that fit Creatable World, I don't really have any that suit the style I'm going for with this custom. So I'm going to have to make pants and a shirt, and I thought maybe I'd go ahead and make a video showing the pants, because they're not just pants, they're the 5-pocket jeans that I've been making for like 20 years now, and I believe I can sew them pretty fast, so I thought maybe you'd like to see that. I have not shared this pattern because I mentioned I'm lazy and I would have to do a lot of work on it to get it ready for other people to use, especially the idea that to make it Barbie sized, I'm using my little weird seam allowance, so I'd have to increase the seam allowance for other people to end up with pants that fit Barbie. However, to actually fit the Creatable World body, I initially thought I could use my Blythe-sized jeans pattern, but it's too small. So I tried on a Momoko-sized jeans, and those fit. They're a little small in the waist. And my Momoko-sized jeans are actually my Barbie jeans with a bigger seam allowance. So in theory I could share them as they are, the pattern, to end up with pants that would fit smaller bodies, but again, there's probably weird shortcuts I'm taking when I sew. I don't even realize I'm doing that other people wouldn't understand at all, because my brain does things. Anyway, let's cut some cloth out. Alright, I'm going to try it from this angle. Maybe it'll be easier to see what I'm doing than I did with the last angle last view. So I'm going for this sort of faded denim color, which actually I think the last pair of doll jeans I made, also using the Barbie size pattern for a much smaller than Barbie body, was the same stuff. So yeah, I know, my nail polish it's not something I usually do, so I have not redone it. I'm just acknowledging it, I'm not changing it. And we have this selvage here, so I know which side is up and down, which way is the grain. I don't have to do that stretchy thing, but just for illustration, it stretches quite a bit that way, and not really that way. Alright, so my Barbie-ish jeans pattern. Okay, that's 5 minutes. I can't remember if I've shared that pattern. I think I've meant to. Or did I share? I actually have a pattern for pull-on elastic waist doll jeans where it's it fits curvy and can. A lot of things fit curvy and can. So I'm trying not to flip any of these so they go in different directions. I don't think denim is one of those fabrics that really has a problem with nap. Some fabrics, the way they look going this way is completely different from the way they look going that way. So you have to be careful of nap. And I generally follow nap just in case. Alright, which means I won't do one this way and one this way, no matter how much fabric it seems to save. And the Creatable World legs are a lot shorter than the Barbie legs, but I'm not going to deal with figuring out how much shorter until it's actually time to hem them. That will work fine. I don't have to cut them off now. And I do use considerably more straight pins than normal on a pattern cutting out the jeans, because there are a lot of changes in direction around the pattern piece. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this out before I figure out where the next piece is going to go. And I have closed the door in here, so I'm not audible in the rest of the house much, and it's getting hot, so I'm taking my jacket off. And I think you can see this pattern that I have altered it so much. Like, apparently at some point it was just a little bit too narrow, so I had to cut it lengthwise and then spread it a little bit. So again, this is hoping these videos will help show that the way I sew is maybe not as refined as people thought it was. But I have been doing this for a long time, so I know where to take shortcuts, in theory. And if I'd wanted like a wider legged pant or flared pants or bell bottoms, I would have just made those changes on the fly as I'm cutting out, like I did with the bodice in the last doll sewing video. I said the phrase that I use for it is I improvise around my patterns. I'm a little more likely to do that with doll pat sewing than with me sewing, but that's not out of the realm of possibility either. Alright. The pocket bag. That just gets one pin because there's not that much of it. Is there enough room for the back pocket here? If I move the pocket bag, there will be. And one little silly thing I do is I start aligning things, like stacking them with things that go together. So that when I take these to the sewing machine, I'll already have them sorted into what gets sewn to what, kind of. And as I mentioned in the last video, I do chain things as much as possible with these jeans too. Just so I'm not constantly cutting the thread tails. And again, throwing away more thread than it actually takes to sew each seam. So I only need one of these. This is for the change pocket. I'll go ahead and pull some string so I get this top edge perfectly straight. Which doesn't really make a difference, again, with the way it fits or feels on the doll, but is this actually easier to fold it over if it's on grain. So I'll go ahead and pull all sides, just so they're all straight in theory. Alright, now I need to sew cut the back yoke. I know there was some controversy years ago that someone was making YouTube videos about how to sew some patterns they were selling, for, I think for plush. And people were pausing the video when the pattern pieces were shown and basically tracing the pattern pieces off of that. So, oh, I don't have to buy the pattern. Which, if someone is selling you the pattern, that's just, you know, a little, maybe not the nicest thing to do. But if pausing this video and tracing the pattern pieces that I have actually is something that you want to go through the effort to do, go for it. Alright, now the waistband. Again, I ripped that so that edge is straight. I will actually rip this edge too, because like I said, lazy. And I don't know, maybe it'll horrify somebody, some people, how many shortcuts I take. I mean it to be encouraging. Like I said, people think I sew pretty good. I think I sew pretty good, but people seem to agree. So if you can see how haphazard I am, and it still turns out okay, then maybe you won't be so harsh on your own technique. Alright, I'm going to cut this a little longer because the Creatable World waist is wider than Momoko, even though this is technically Barbie's size. It's just for various reasons I'm going to cut this longer. I don't have to use the entire length. I might end up cutting off a lot of it, but this is just to give a little safety room, wiggle room. Alright, and then the inner pocket I cut from white cotton. I mean, I could cut it from anything that was thinner than the denim, but I just traditionally use white cotton. And again, I hope my arm hasn't been in the way the whole time of everything I've been doing. However, I'm only cutting things out. There's nothing really, I don't think there's anything unusual I do that I would reveal with a nice, clear, concise video shot of it. So you're probably not missing anything, even if I am completely away. Okay. So that is everything cut. I'm going to clean up and then go to the sewing machine. Okay, it is a very bright sunny day outside right now, so hopefully the lighting isn't quite as dramatic as it was in the last video. I've already loaded old gold yellow thread into my machine, and it's just time to start sewing. Alright, first thing I do, like I said, fold over and stitch one edge of the coin pocket. Like I said last time, the take-up lever really needs to be at the top of its travel when you start, or else it struggles. Alright. I increase the tension on my stitching when I'm sewing a top stitch visible thread from the back, just because sometimes it needs it. I think technically I'm probably using a presser foot that this machine doesn't like, but Don't worry about it, I compensate for it. Okay, so first thing I do is sew the pocket bags to the pocket opening. Now I have to remember I'm doing 1/4 inch instead of my weird presser foot width. Getting those ready. Alright. Now we clip into this seam allowance. So when it's turned, it has enough room to physically spread out inside there. A little bit of light finger pressing. Edge stitch. And I did delint oil and put a new piece of tape on my metal end plate here and grease everything up inside, so hopefully my machine seems quieter on video now than it did before, because it was pretty growly before. Okay, yeah, I did this in slightly the wrong order. It won't be a problem. Alright, now on this side, don't ask me if this is the left side or the right side. I have issues with that. Alright, so you have the shape of the pocket in there, so you take one of these inner pocket pieces and line that up, and I just realized that I should have straightened out the top of that when I was cutting it, because the Creatable World does not have a significant waist, but I can compensate for that when sewing it together. Alright, so now just lay those together. And this I can go ahead and put the narrow seam allowance in, because this is just making a pocket. It's not fitting anything. Great. Now, before I sew the next one on, I gotta lay out the change pocket. So, I line these. And I put this over where it's going to just peek out. Alright, now I just sew that on. The edges don't need to be finished in any way. Okay. Now, technically I need to sew this to that, but I'm still chaining, so I don't have to pull that out and have it like a thread tail that I gotta cut off. I'm going to start assembling the back. So that, sewing the yoke to the back pieces. That Okay, now I'm going to sew on the other back yoke. Okay, now it starts to get even less logical than it was before. Now I'm going to sew the front halves together from the crotch extension just until the fly overlap extension. And because I would have to pull it out to do the next step, I'm going to switch to the next step on the back yoke, which is top stitching. And again, I align the edge of what I'm top stitching with the inside edge of the straight stitch foot. And that gives me a nice close stitch that I don't have to eyeball. Okay, now this naturally wants to fold over, which is good, that's what we want. So, folding it straight up in line from stitching. I gotta reach over here, remember I put it, and get the hook and loop tape. Now, of course, snaps are fine. I like, again, I'm lazy. I like the hook tape. Okay, so I take the soft loop part. I'm going to sew that to the part I just folded. Right to the edge. All right. Actually, I'm going to do a straight pin, just this, no, they're good in place. Now I'm going to sew from the top of the stitch that connects both sides together. You get over. Back stitches, because that is not going to get trapped in another seam to lock it in place like a lot of things. Go ahead and cut off that back piece. Alright. Sew over just a little bit and start to turn it so it's going up. And see, that has caught the very edge of the hook and loop tape. I will be doing more stitching eventually on the other edge, but not yet. That could have been a better curve. It's a little square, but again, I don't care. Okay, now I gotta do this other top stitching on the back. Now I'm going to sew the hook and loop tape to the bottom. So this is the rougher hook part. Align it with that seam that was sewn just so halves together. Does this make sense what I'm saying? I don't know. I've never actually verbalized this process before. This is another reason I have not prepared this pattern to share, because I don't know if I could actually write out what to do in any way that makes sense. But now I am sewing on the hook part. I'm going to sew down one edge of this and up the other edge of it so it is completely securely fastened at this point in the process. Alright, and for now, that's everything with the front. Now we focus on the back. My least favorite part, which is vital, is the back pockets. Alright, so, I mean the reason it's my least favorite is because it takes a little effort to get things symmetrical. So I'm going to fold that edge over. Actually, I'm going to put them face to face. So I'm folding both edges over the same amount on each one, and finger press. Alright, so top edge, stitch a little farther from the edge. The front and other side, alright. Other back pocket, top edge. Now the silly part, actually maybe I should have done this before. The silly part is always if I'm going to decorate the back pocket or not. So, so I gotta do these. See, I've already thinking so much that I'm pulling out way more thread than I need to. Alright, how am I going to do these symmetrical? I am lining this angle up with the 5/8 inch seam allowance, so in theory that will help them be somewhat symmetrical. Alright, now I'm going to do another row next to that. I'm going to switch back to straight stitch and do one between those. And that should be fancy enough. Oops, okay. Maybe I'll do 2 on each side because that's way off center. Like I said, I'm haphazard. Alright. Good enough. So I'll put this back to my normal stitch length. Now, the part that I think is most annoying about pockets is folding them so they're the same size when I actually sew them on. I know when you do real pockets, you actually like flip this to the inside out and sew the edges so that when you turn it right side out, this is edges automatically. Alright, and now is when I have to say goodbye to chaining, even though I kind of deviated already. I have so much lint on my skirt. Okay. So right now this side I am just randomly turning stuff to the inside and pinning it. And it's when I get to folding the other one up that I'll be more exacting and trying to make it match this one. The only main requirement is that all the back stitching I did on the edges of everything needs to be hidden. Okay, the other requirement is the pocket looks at least somewhat symmetrically folded. Not super symmetrical, but it's passable. Alright, and I get things even by placing face to face and folding one so it matches the other one, in theory. They're not going to be directly next to each other. I can get away with some variation. Which way do I want the angles to go? That way. Alright. Now I pin these to the back, roughly in the center. Neighbor starts a motorcycle. So that side is pinned. It's really the same. A little narrow. And now it's time to edge stitch all the way around each of these pockets. Another thing you have to watch is sometimes when you rotate, you leave the needle down, pick up the presser foot and rotate it around the needle, but sometimes you can be at just the right part in the cycle of making the stitch that when you're rotating it, the rotation actually causes the bobbin thread and the top thread to come unwrapped from each other. And then when the needle comes up, it just pulls out that last stitch you think you made. So that is something you have to watch at those little corners. And when it happens, just back tack a little. Or say it's fine. No one will be looking that closely. Okay, pockets on. Again, we're past the point where we can chain anymore. Something I like to do, I don't know if it actually makes a difference, is things like this where the stitching that ends is way out in the open and always will be, and there's no chance that it's going to be covered up by an intersecting seam. I trim the thread on top as close as possible, and I come in from the bottom and give it a little tug on the other half of the thread, and that will pull the very edge of the top thread, the very end of it, to the underside. It just, subtly cleaner. Okay, so, and again, I'm realizing that I probably should have flattened that center back a little bit so the ink curve, but too late now. I'll just try to taper it. Okay, right now I'm just cutting a little extra bulk out. Now lay these on top of each other. And to get the seams aligned where the yolks come together, I make sure the pin passes through all the stitching on both sides. Alright, now sew those together. Like I said, we're starting to 1/4 inch. And then when we get back here at the top, we're tapering down to whatever the width of the presser foot is. And if that's too big, I will have a chance later to take it in to make the seam deeper. It's fine. Okay, so now the back unit is assembled and the front unit is assembled. Now I've sewed the front back along the inseam, which it may seem a little odd, but traditional jeans actually had their welted top stitched seam on the inseams, not on the outside, because the idea of traditional jeans was you needed a very durable pant, and having a heavier amount of stitching and top stitching and seaming on the inside of the leg made sense, especially when you're riding a horse, because that's going to where all the wear and tear is going to be. So I like to do that. Also, doing it this way means that when it's time to sew the outer side seams, I can actually kind of wiggle it onto a doll and make some adjustments for fit. Okay, I'm going to sew inside this seam, this inside inseam. Again, don't usually think about what I'm doing, I usually just do it. And also again, I put the needle through the seam itself on both parts and attempt to hopefully keep them lined up. Like, see, I don't know if you can see how lined up the back yoke stitch seams are. It's pretty good. So. Now I will top stitch that seam. And I top stitch it toward the front, just because. Actually, haven't worn jeans for a while, so I can't like look at my legs and check. Okay, so there is that. Now I am going to check the fit against the doll. I'm going to edit that out because the doll is not finished, and I actually am thinking that I'll probably do another video of the actual customization of this doll, so I'm going to keep that as a surprise. So I will check the fit and see if I need to make things narrower or try to eke out a little more width, and I know I definitely make the legs shorter, but I'll be back. Okay, the fit on the top looks good, especially if I'm trying to imagine compensating for the waistband that's going to be put on. Need to take up quite a bit of length on the cuffs, as I suspected I'd need to. Again, I'm not measuring things, I'm just laying them across themselves and folding. You may have noticed, if you watched the other video, I do that a lot. Okay. So normally I would stitch these from the inside because I wouldn't know how much actual fabric I'd have, and I don't want to stitch off the edge, but since I have so much, I can stitch these from the top. And we're going to stitch this the full presser foot width. Because Jean's bottom hems are a little deeper than the top stitching depth. Alright, now I can trim that. I mean, since this is a kid, I could also probably have made it so it looked cuffed. But whenever I've tried that in the past, sometimes it ends up so bulky that it's hard to get the foot through. Alright, now before I sew the sides together, I gotta deal with, remember, the edge of the front Velcro is not sewn. And this is also why I had to try it on now instead of later, because I'm going to sew a continuous top stitch all the way from the back around to that front edge. So I won't be able to adjust this back seam either after this point. You do have to make sure not to stitch through the other half of the front opening. didn't have the bottom secured properly, so it got folded up. So I will be restitching that. It's fine. And actually I'm going to stitch it over, starting at the previous stitching. Alright, so there is the front fly, and now we sew the side seams. Flip it inside out. Get these pockets tacked in place because you don't want those wandering into weird configurations. Keep discovering thread tails I haven't cut. So it is most important that the hem matches itself, because that will be exposed. It's okay if the top doesn't align completely, because that's going to be inside the waistband. Now we'll trim this to reduce bulk. Alright, so again, trim this corner of the seam edge off so it won't poke out from the bottom. And I do that for the other side. Okay, now is the waistband, which is very fiddly. I mean, I don't think any, well, okay, the back pockets are a little fiddly, but compared to the waistband, I will always feel like that is the most fiddly part of the whole thing. So what I'm pinning in place now is where the edge of the pockets and the pocket bags are, because that can come unfolded and make things a little bit larger. Okay. I will admit I've been doing this for this kind of doll pants for like 20 years now, and when it gets to the point of sewing on, the waistband, I still have to stop and think about if I should have the pants right side out or inside out. So, the part on top, I'm just going to trim this a little so it's clear for the edges. The part that's on top you actually put so it extends past the edge just a little bit, and then you fold that to the inside, or I do. Other people may do it completely differently. And I'm trying to remember if I actually matters if the side seams are open or not. I do pin this even though it's just sewing a straight piece on because it is so small that it's going to wiggle out of place. Oh yeah, I gave a lot of extra length when I cut this out. It's fine, it's fine. Alright. So, I'm going to sew this at roughly 1/4 inch, not quite, somewhere between 1/4 inch and the presser foot depth. It's actually going to be trimmed. Again, I'm sewing slow enough that I am completely aware of where those straight pins are. Okay. Now I turn it right side out with the help of my ancient dowel rod that I've been using to turn doll pants right side out for about 20 years. I mean, it used to be so much more detail-oriented. I have a larger dowel rod that I would use to press doll pants seams and sleeves and stuff. This is good enough. Okay. So, that seam I just sewed. Now I'm going to trim it to about half of its width. This is because the waistband, I mean, I guess I could cut the waistband wider, but the size that I want it to be, I couldn't achieve if I left the seam allowance the full size. Alright, turn that up. Now, fold it to the inside, keeping this front edge folded around. Again, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if you can actually see what I'm doing. But that's how I do it. Okay, now I'm going to, in theory, stitch in the ditch. Stitch in the ditch, hangnails, sorry. Stitch in the knit ditch is where, after you've sewn two pieces together, and then you open it up, and then you sew in the seam of what you've just sewn. So this is right under the waistband. And I am really pulling on those thread tails to get this thing to move, because it is, even though it's lightweight denim, it's still denim, and it's just thick enough that it's making the presser foot not sit flat. Which can make it hard to get things started. You notice maybe that I've not done belt loops. I don't. Alright, when I get to the end, I want to do my stitching on the hook loop tape. Actually sew up to the top and the back. And I can trim off this extra bit. Come back to here, trim that trim, and then also I trim away the bit that overlaps the hook and loop tape. And there we are. Depends on my mood whether or not I sew a snap up here, because yes, the snap does keep it closed, but the snap also adds a lot of bulk. And the shirt I'm planning to do with this will cover the top of the pants, so threads. I think I'm okay. So I'm going to try them on the doll. Okay, there were two issues that I had to address. One ankle was slightly wider than the other one, so I had to go back and forth a few times to make the wider one narrower. And the other one was, because this was a pattern for adult female bodies, it had hips. So I had to go back in with the pants inside out and just flatten those hips. So, concealing the head, because it is still work in progress. Here they are. The pocket's plenty deep enough to get a hand into. Back pockets, a little silly, but they're there. I did end up, not on purpose, making the waistband a little wider than I had intended, but it's fine if it's if it ends up under the shirt like I'm intending. You won't see it, and if I change my mind and decide to tuck the shirt in, there's actually enough room for it now. Although, like I said, if I do that, I might go ahead and put a snap on, or I might try a hook and loop, because or hook and loop is the Velcro, hook and eye, because I have been looking at like fashion royalty type clothes, and I see that a lot of their shirts are closed with hooks and eyes and not snaps. So that is a relatively low bulk option that I could also employ in trying to just get this to lay flat like it's closed. But I will do that some other time, some other place. For now, this video is over, much shorter than the last one, and if you have questions, I'll try to answer them. Thanks for watching.